Welcome to Storytelling. This week's guest has over 25 years of extensive experience as a CEO, serial entrepreneur, board advisor, and investor. He is a globally recognized authority on innovation, strategy, leadership, and culture. He's also a keynote speaker and a co-author of the best-selling management book, Building a Culture of Innovation. Please welcome Cris Beswick. Hello, Cris, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you.
Cris, we often talk about success like it's a destination, but for most people, it's a much messier path. What did that look like for you in the early years?
Oh, that's a big one. Well, it was definitely messy. It was definitely conflicted. So let me unpack that. So I started out really as an entrepreneur, didn't really get on in the world of work. I've only had one job. I can't remember how long I was there, but maybe 18 months, something like that. Quit my job and started out on my own and realized that this utopian view of let's be an entrepreneur and, you know, what you see on Dragon's Den and things like that is definitely way more messier and way harder than it appears on the TV. So like many people listening, I've seen the good parts and the bad parts of that. You know, the good parts are brilliant stuff from clients doing great work. The bad parts are sitting in your spare room at home at 2 a.m. with your head in the hands going, how the hell am I going to pay the mortgage this month? So, you know, the ups and downs can be great and they can be horrible and stressful. But I basically started my own company in early 2000s. And I was really, really fortunate that I built a group of companies and managed to sell them in 2008.
Often when entrepreneurs start out in business, they have these great ideas. What would you say are some of the hardest lessons that you learned along the way?
I think you think it's going to be really, really easy as an entrepreneur. And I think partly some of that is created by the media and by TV and by, you know, society in general. You know, entrepreneurship's become this cool thing, right? And we see entrepreneurs on TV, but we only tend to see the ones that have made it. You know, we see the Peter Joneses and people like that and Theo Pavitas. You know, we see the Dragon's Den and we think, wow, entrepreneurship. Look, these guys are multimillionaires. What we don't see is the 10,000 entrepreneurs that have come before them that are bankrupt and failed and have lost their house and all of those things. So we don't see the messy side of entrepreneurship. And I was one of the fortunate ones. Entrepreneurship for me, as I left entrepreneurship, as I exited my companies for the first time, I came out of it okay. The big lesson for me was, holy cow, this thing ain't going to be as easy as I thought it was. And that was a really stark sort of, not a revelation, but it was a really stark sort of point where I thought, okay, I'm not going to make money as quick. We are going to struggle. How are we going to pay the mortgage? You know, this isn't going to be solved in the next few months. We're going to have to, and I say we, because at the time, you know, my partner at the time, not business partner, but girlfriend at the time, you know, that burden is then shared, right? You know, if the mortgage doesn't get paid, she's living in the same house as well, right? And if you can't pay the bills and things like that. And I think the real hard lesson for me was, this is going to take some time. How do we bridge the gap from 2 months ago I was earning a really good salary and now I actually don't know when I'm going to earn enough money to start to break even. That was a really scary point. And I think anyone listening out there that is thinking about entrepreneurship or has tried it, it's likely that they will have been in that same position because it's a reality.
And how do you get through that mentally? Because it is a challenge to as you rightly say, you've gone from having a salaried role, you go into entrepreneurship, suddenly things are a bit uncertain.
Yeah.
How do you stay motivated? How do you get through that?
Do you know what? For me, I think the courage of your conviction is a really powerful driving force.
Mhm.
And I've always known if I start something, whether it's going to work or not. And then sometimes, I've known I've started things and I've thought this isn't going to work. So I've been able to cut things and stop things really quickly. But the
Mhm.
things that have worked out, the things that have been success, I've known really early on. I've just had a really brilliant gut feel for whether they work out. And the thing about gut feel is that's the one bit about entrepreneurship you can't really teach anyone. You can go on courses and you can read books and things like that, but that butterfly in your stomach gut feel thing where despite the data, despite everyone saying it's not going to work, but you just know there's just something that tells you it's going to work. And that has always served me really, really well. The challenge is from the point where you start something to the point where it becomes financially self-sufficient. That's the unknown. So I've always known that something would work, but the timeline is always the unknown bit. And what I mean by when I've always known my gut feeling about the things that I've kicked off and the businesses that I've launched were going to work was I knew the value proposition was right. I knew the problem that we were solving was right. I knew the value that we created was right. I've known the business model was right. All of the things that some of the things I teach organizations now in terms of innovation, all of those core foundations still have to be the same. The value proposition, the problem you're solving, the customer base, are the stakeholders there? Financially, does it work on both sides of the equation? Is it the right price point? Can you do it? I've very, very quickly built a really good feeling about whether all of those are right, and it's served me really, really well. But it's a difficult thing.
What would you say success meant to you then compared to what it means to you now?
So this is the thing, right? And you started out by saying that the success bit is like, there's an end point, right? It's an
Mm.
outcome or there's a journey. I think in reality, for me, success when I started out was definitely materialistic.
Mm.
It was definitely, I had the trappings of all of that. In the early 2000s, I was now running a group of companies, super successful, and I had the trappings of all that, the big Rolex, the big house, money wasn't a problem, Porsche outside, all of that. But I was desperately unhappy internally, right? And I think those external drivers were to try and show the outside world that I was successful. But
Mhm.
actually, you could have taken all of that away at any point off the back of the question, yeah, but Chris, are you actually happy? And the
Mm.
answer was no. So the measurement of true success was happiness at the time. And I didn't know, I wasn't aware of that metric. I was completely blind to that metric. If you ask me now what success looks like, success for me is quality time with my family. Success for me is knowing that in 10 years' time, when both my girls, whether they leave college or whatever, but when they enter the world of work, will we be able to support them and give them the leg up that they're going to need? Because the reality is for people now getting on the housing market and entering the world of work, super difficult. In another 10 years, when my girls do the same, it's going to be even more difficult. Bank of mum and dad is definitely going to be something that they call on. And I don't mean that for handouts, but I mean, how do we help them kick off a really great start in life? If I hit that metric, that will be success.
Let's go back because you said that you were extraordinarily unhappy despite the materialistic success that you
Yeah,
experienced at the time.
yeah.
Was there a moment or a mindset shift that contributed to that feeling? And when did you know that things weren't right?
So, I'm happy to be sort of really honest about that part of my life. I jokingly refer back to it now. I mean, it's not a joke, but I make light of it. I refer back to probably a 2-year period from, say, 2005 to 2007. So group of companies, we've got offices, we've got teams, we're doing work all around the world. On the face of it, you go, wow, this guy's made it. Great company, he's got great people, he's got a brilliant team. You know, my dad was working for me at the time. That was a really sort of high point for me, that my dad, he was able to come and help run my companies. Beautiful house, all the trappings of success. But what I didn't realize was, I didn't realize how desperately unhappy I was. And I was completely burnt out. So by the end of 2007, I genuinely can't tell you why I did this. And the only explanation I have is, so let me paint the picture. Relationship at home's broken down. You know, all of those external trappings, great, but relationship at home's broke down. So I'm now in hotels 3-4 nights a week minimum, because going back home was too difficult a conversation. That environment just wasn't right. The relationship with me and my girlfriend's broken down. So I'm now making excuses, saying, oh, yeah, I'm not home tonight. I've got another meeting here, there. So, you know, and they were just excuses to stay away, right? Because the real thing that needed to be dealt with was that. I'm now in hotels 3, 4, 5 nights a week, eating rubbish food, 2-3 stone overweight, drinking every night, on my own, lonely. But on the face of it, God, Chris, look at the new car he's just bought. Oh, he's off to the Maldives again. Ooh, all of that. Totally superficial. And all of that was to mask the fact that I was desperately unhappy. I remember walking back to a hotel. I think I was in Leeds. I remember walking back to a hotel. I had no preconceived ideas about leaving my companies. I hadn't thought about it. It wasn't something I'd even devoted 1 second of brain power to. And the only explanation I can give you is, I was so far into being completely burnt out as a human being, my brain just went, I'm intervening. So my whatever self-preservation thing you have in your head, and this wasn't conscious, I put my hand in my pocket, I dialed my partner at the time, and I literally said these words, I'm out, I'm done. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I need to leave. And I hung the phone up. There was no pre-thought or thinking about that. I think that was my brain, just self-preservation going, there needs to be an intervention, because if something doesn't happen and you don't change the trajectory that you're on, you'll die. And I genuinely think I would have either killed myself or, heaven forbid, you know, sat in the hotel bar drinking one night and got in the car the next morning and drove, and do you know what I mean? And then that could have been catastrophic for other people. But I was definitely on a downward spiral that was only getting, it was only going one way. And my brain, I think, kicked in and intervened. That's the only explanation I have. And from that day forward, my life has been completely different.
So let's talk about that transformation in terms of your life being completely different, because now you've built a reputation around helping others, particularly around innovation. So how did you transition into this new area of your life?
So I took quite a bit of time out post 2008. And what most executives don't do is take time out to think. They don't take time out to think about themselves and whether they're all right. They don't take time out to think about the business and let's think about the future. They're consumed with the day-to-day. The big catalyst for me is I took time out to think. And my first question was, who's Cris Beswick and what does Cris Beswick want to do next? And I took a long time to think about that. And I think that massively helped. If I hadn't have been self-aware enough to ask me that question and to give myself enough time to answer, I think I'd have probably just jumped out of the frying pan into the fire and jumped into something else. And actually, I wouldn't have healed in terms of that. The mental health part, I think the time fixed that. And then I made a very, very conscious decision not to put myself under the same level of continuous pressure and stress to build something, I made the decision consciously not to do that. So I moved into the consultancy space. I wrote a book about culture and about innovation and creativity and leadership. And I started speaking about it on stage. And I've been very open over the years about the burnout that I went through and what happened and the cause and effect and, the collateral damage of the people and everything else around you that gets, it is like a metaphorical hand grenade, right? It goes off, but that impact radius is massive in some cases. And mine affected a lot of people. And I made a conscious decision that I wouldn't let that happen again. I also realized I reverse engineered like what was driving me to constantly go more, build more money, more success, more of everything. What was driving me to do that? And what was the fundamental thing that drove me to do that was all I wanted at the time, or what I thought I wanted, was for my dad to go, wow, you've done brilliant there, son. It was literally for the adoration and my dad to go, well done, you've made it, son. And I never got that. But that, when I reverse engineered it, that was the catalyst. From about 15, 16 years old, there was a point, there was an incident with my dad where from that day forward, everything that I did up until I was, 35 when I sort of retired from my first company, every decision I made, everything I did was all in pursuit of my dad going, actually, you're amazing. You've done really, really good there. And the other decision I made was post 2008, post that was stop trying to please other people.
Because that was a question that I was going to ask you as well. Because like, if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself some advice now, not just business advice, but life advice, what would you say? And you just said that one of them is not to please other people. What else would you say to your...
Yeah. What do you want to achieve? Not what do you think other people want or need you to achieve? Yeah. Do mum and dad want you to go to college or university? And I'm not advocating people not going, but I think a lot of young people think that it's a trajectory. It's, you grow up, junior school, secondary school, college, university, get a job. And then by the time you're 30, you're Mr. and Mrs. Average, 3 beds, semi-detached, 2.4 children, and a golden retriever, right? That in my day when I was growing up, that was the trajectory, right? And then you work all your life and you retire at 65 and hopefully you've paid the mortgage off. And at best, you might have 10 years before your money runs out. There was this trajectory. I made decisions because my assumption was, well, that's sort of what everyone does. And my parents are sort of conforming to that. Oh, well, you should go to college. And then when you've done that, oh, you should go to school. And, oh, do you want to go in the military? Oh, you don't want to do that. You need an education. And if I'd have not conformed and thought, yeah, but what do I want to do? I think the trajectory would have been completely different. But I was trying to please other people and create this version of myself that I thought they wanted me to be or they needed me to be.
I want to take a step back. Something that you mentioned, which I think is so profoundly important, when you mentioned that you took time out.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't feel as though they can take time out, because if you have a gap in your work career, then it could look detrimental. Can you share with us again the importance of taking time out?
So I think taking time out is important in general. Like I definitely see it with the executives that I work with. They don't take enough time out, both personally, just to recharge, physically and mentally to recharge, and to let the pressure of work, of running, my clients run enormous organizations, right? They don't take enough time out to let the pressure of that constant, and it's not Monday to Friday, 38 hours a week. For these guys, they're still doing meetings and they're still doing stuff at weekends. It's 7 days a week at that level. and they don't take enough time out to let that pressure, they're always at boiling point is a good metaphor. And they don't go, I'm going to switch the kettle off for a couple of days and just let the temperature drop down a bit. And that's where you start getting to burnout. So yes, taking time out, but even in general, taking time out for most people could just be that 2-week holiday in the summer where you've booked it off. Like, make the most of that time. Like, really make the most of it. Don't just go, well, I am taking time out because I'm on holiday and we're going to Spain for 2 weeks or whatever it is. Like, really figure out, how do I really switch off and recharge and drop that metaphorical temperature down? How am I really, really going to recharge myself? Because for most people, they don't get enough time to do that. It was super important for me because I literally was completely burnt out. And if anyone's been through that, they know how destructive that can be. I was fortunate. I could afford to take a lot of time out. So I could afford to go, whatever it takes, let's see what happens. And if that's 6 months, if it's a year, then so be it. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. Most people can't do that. So you're then in the situation where I need to take time out, but I can't afford it. I've got to go back to work. I can't take 6 months off. How do I pay the bills? So you're now back in a pressure situation. And it's a treadmill you don't get off. But I think people have got to find a way to recharge their physical and mental batteries. Otherwise, it's cancerous, right? It's a hidden stress is a hidden killer. Burnout is a hidden killer. We have no physical signs of it. There are signs people can spot, and there might be signs we feel, but for the most part, it's invisible. Most people that, you'll know these stats. The biggest killer of men under 50 in the UK is suicide. Now, out of all of those men, and I'm not taking away that there's women kill themselves as well, but as a man, if I look at that stat, that's frightening. I would have thought cancer, heart attacks, flat. It's suicide. How many of those people that have died in that way, how many of their friends and relatives would look and go, but I didn't think there was anything wrong. There was no signs. He was great. He was happy. He was like, I only saw him yesterday. We had beers in the pub, right? That is so common. So the signs are almost invisible. We've got to take time. Otherwise, it is a killer. And that's not an over dramatization. Stress and mental health is so important.
Thank you for sharing that. What keeps you curious now? Where do you feel most alive at the moment?
What keeps me curious is I'm very picky about the clients that I work with and the organizations I work with. I wouldn't have been 20 years ago. Are they going to pay the invoices, the fee right? Then I'm in. What keeps me really curious and passionate about what I do now, people to understand what I do now, I basically work with C-suite. I do a lot of leadership development around innovation. So how do we get organizations to genuinely innovate? And what I mean by that is, how do we get organizations and cultures in organizations to solve really tricky, wicked problems and be able to shape the future? What keeps me curious is knowing that if I can enable that in an organization, they can change the future. They can genuinely start to shift what they do as an organization and maybe solve global systemic problems. And all of that is making the world a better place for my girls to grow up.
No, I think that's absolutely amazing. Cris, I just want to thank you for your candid discussion and for being an amazing guest on my podcast.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
If you have been affected by some of the issues raised in today's discussion and you would like further details about Cris Beswick, then please follow links in the show notes.